Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me again on another episode of the Alex Hayes Podcast. I am your host, Alex Hayes. Joining me today is none other than Martin Martinez from Acquired Ventures. He is an experienced entrepreneur of over multiple decades. He has started and exited 3 different companies, acquired 5. He is on a track to grow to $100 million in profit in public as an investor of SaaS startup products now. But I am here today to talk to Martin about his journey and what has brought him here. And I am so excited to sit down and talk to him and get some wisdom and insights on how he got to where he is today and to help you guys out. So Martin, thanks so much for being here today.
Absolutely, Alex. Thanks for having me.
All right. Let's dive into this. You have a very interesting and very unique upbringing because I believe you were born in Uruguay. You had some time in Spain and then you ended up in Australia. You moved around a ton as a kid. Talk to us about what that was like as growing up in such an environment of change.
As you can imagine, as a child, you don't know any better. So to me, it was normal. That was life. My parents, yes, I was born in Uruguay. I was 1 month old and they relocated to Spain for a better future. And by the time I was 14, I had moved 26 different times and I went to 7 different schools. When I ultimately went to Australia in 1999. And 3 years ago, I made the move to Dubai, which is where I live today. So it's been, if you just look at the childhood part, before I went to Australia, it was different. It was tumultuous, but it wasn't negative in any way. My parents were just looking for a better future. And as typical migrants, they go where the opportunities are.
Amazing. I know you were young in some of these places, but what was one of some of your most memorable time and place that you've lived in?
Look, to be honest, we moved so much that I don't have much recollection below 10 years of age. I have snippets. I don't have childhood friends. So it was more about a memory of being close to my family, really close knit. I'm an only child on top of that. So it was my parents and I roaming the world. So it was just one of these things that it was a happy childhood. Is different, obviously, different times than we are today. But it was fun, exciting, got accustomed to moving and relocating and seeing new places.
I love it. I love it. We travel full time as well with our family, so it resonates very deeply with me. And you you were exposed to entrepreneurship kind of by force early on, and you had to basically rescue your parents' bakery in Australia at a very early age. Tell us about that experience and what bring us back. What describe that context because most people can't understand what that means, right? When you say
Sure.
save your parents' business, talk to us about that and what was going on.
Yes, it's definitely an interesting story. Um, I was academically bright, but I was terrible at tests. So I was very curious. I was always doing the hardest levels of maths and economics and all those types of things. But it was more out of curiosity than actually wanting to excel in school. So I did not have a path towards tertiary education, universities, or anything like that. One, because my parents couldn't afford it, and two, it's because I sucked at tests. So I was never going to get the right exam results in order to actually qualify. So my direction was veering towards international business. That's kind of what I was gravitating to. It was something that was of interest. And I was right after high school, I went into a local college that had some international courses. The knowledge that I acquired in those courses helped me land my first job, which was actually at a bank in Australia in international operations. So I was dealing with international transfers, transactions, and so on and so forth. Back in the 90s, which is when I got into that space. It's not like what you have today with crypto and everything else. A lot of stuff was being done manually. $1 million transactions I had to process manually and stuff like that. So that was kind of my first job. But I quickly learned that I couldn't take orders from people. That's a typical life of an entrepreneur. I couldn't understand some of the reasons and logic behind some of the policies and procedures that they had. So I questioned everything. It's just a typical, I won't call it rebellious, but it is a typical, entrepreneur. It's like you question everything and you think there's a better way. So I didn't really like what I was doing, and I wasn't earning much either. It was really bad pay. And one day I realized that this was not for me. And the day that I realized was once there was a gentleman who was in the cubicle next to me. who had been in the bank for 30 years. And the manager of the section that I was in stopped everybody from work, congratulated this gentleman for 30 years of hard work. He received a pen, and 10 seconds later, he went back to work. So I thought, if I have to work for 30 years to get a pen and be in the cubicle right next to me, I thought, this is just not going to work. So that kind of got me the negative experience of employment, but I still had to do something, right? So I had to earn a living. I was living with my parents, but I wanted to make my own money. My parents did have a bakery, and they were great at creating product, but not great at running a business. So I came in at a time where there was a shift in Australia from standalone shops like bakeries like my parents, where people buy it and take it home, to the cafe culture that we see today. And my parents did not transition correctly, and they missed that boat. So the business was declining because of not adjusting your product to the market, essentially. However, the business was still working. They just mismanaged it. My dad was getting, I won't say conned, but he was getting duped into buying large stocks so he could get a lower price, and he would have to pay for a second storage. So just little decisions like that, that over the years put the business in under tremendous pressure. So I didn't like my job. They were struggling, and they were going to get kicked out. There were many, many months of rent behind. So I came in, I restructured everything. I did my best to kind of settle the boat. But what I did most importantly is I said to every single supplier that we had debt, say, you guys are not getting paid until I sort out my rent. And the reason why we wanted to sort out the rent was that if I don't have rent, I don't have a premise. If I don't have a premise, you're never going to get paid. So I negotiated terms with all the suppliers, focused exclusively on paying down the debt and the rent. I secured a new lease, which in those times was 4 years by 4 years. And that gave us the opportunity to then sell the business. And that's how we came to that situation. Fortunately enough, we actually didn't end up selling the business. We sold the lease because it was a prime real estate that we were in, and everybody got paid. And my parents took a little bit of money with them, and they moved on.
Wow. What was that time? How long did it take you to do that?
The process was probably the best part of 6 months until I kind of, was able to pay down the debt and settle with the realtor. Maybe we already had someone that was interested in the lease that was actually a previous neighbor. So my dad knew him for a very long time. So he just wanted to get back into the market and couldn't get a spot. And we got a little bit lucky on that. But at least the business was back in, afloat in a way. It was still selling and making money. It wasn't optimized. It wasn't the right product for the market. It was just one of those things that they mistimed it. But it was an interesting experience, having to, as an 18-year-old at the time, dealing with realtors and suppliers of, with very hefty bills that we owed. Like, it was just a complete duck out of water, but I figured it out.
And what was going through your mind as an 18-year-old young man coming into this? Like, what was going through your mind of moving forward in a way that you can do this, right? So many people suffer from analysis paralysis of like not knowing what to do and could never done it before. But what was it that helped you be able to just get your head down and move forward and do what needed to be done?
Two things, if I can say. One was that I didn't want to work in that bank anymore. Anything was better than working in that bank. And secondly was that, my parents and I were, backs against the wall. There was no time to think. There's no time to plan. There's no time to figure it out. You just do. And what you just said with, analysis paralysis, it normally happens when you have plenty of time or you think you have time. But when you're literally against the ropes, you start fighting, and you try one thing, you try another, and you just keep trying until something works. So I don't think it was a very conscious effort. It was just more about, what the hell do I need to do next to get the next domino to fall? And that was pretty much it.
What was some of the biggest lessons you learned through that experience that helped you achieve later success?
Well, there were plenty of lessons that I learned that I don't think I acknowledged until later in my life and later in my career. Something like, I say this to my dad all the time, still today, is that never fall in love with your business. And I think my dad in particular fell in love with the business they started, but they never looked at the market and changed and evolved and adapted because they were in love with the business they were running originally. But the market wasn't accepting or interested in that product or so one of the things that I see a lot of entrepreneurs do is that they have this original vision, but you have to adapt. You have to meet the market where it is, not, try to drive the market. I don't think Very few companies have the power to drive a market. So that's kind of the biggest lesson that I took is that, you can't just say, I want to do it the same old way. It's going to work because it worked at the beginning. It's not like that. You have to be alert, you have to be patient, and you have to evolve.
Mhm. I love that. Being flexible and adaptable and continue to move forward.
Exactly.
What would you say to somebody that's similar in your dad's position that struggles with falling in love with their business? Like, how do you get somebody to start the process of letting go?
It takes a tremendous amount of effort. I see this all the time. And the biggest issue is that because people work so hard, when you're an entrepreneur, when you're a founder, you are working endless hours. This is your baby. You are nurturing this baby from literally birth to wherever you're taking it, wherever it is at that time. And it's not uncommon that people completely absorb themselves to the business to the point that the business is their identity. And that's the biggest thing that they need to emotionally unlock themselves from the business. Business is an asset. It's similar to buying shares or buying a house or whatever. If you ask my wife, we don't have a house, we have a home. If you ask me, we have a house. So it's just kind of that mental separation that you have to have because it's just an asset and the business is not you. You are the driver, the founder, the starter of this business. You are the person that runs it. But in my dad's particular case, he's a very personal individual, lots of acquaintances, a lot of people know him. They used to call him the mayor of the town that we lived in, even though he was the local baker, because he knew so many people and everybody liked him. So you could say, his name was attached to his business is attached to his name, a personality, because you work so many hours, you're devoted to this business, is kind of the first thing that you need to separate and unlock. It's just forget about this thing being you're here and your business is here and the two separate entities. And then that's the first step towards kind of a process of moving on. It also becomes, I also use the analogy of a mother giving birth, like at some point, whether the teenagers or whatever, the bird needs to leave the nest. And that is very hard for women to do, for men as well, but just, because of the emotional attachment. You gave birth to this thing, you made it, you fed it, you changed the nappies. It's the same thing with a business. And at what point can you emotionally separate to say, this is better for the business, this is better for my child, for them to move on. And that's the process. Can't be done overnight. You need preparation and it starts from that emotional attachment.
Can you force somebody to start doing that, or is that something that the individual themselves has to be willing to start first? Like where's it start?
It starts with being humble that not everything is a success because of you. That's something that is very hard for many founders. I've experienced this myself. I thought, if I can excuse my French, I thought my shit didn't stink when I was running certain businesses. I thought everything was because of me. And you have to give credit to other things that are happening that are giving that business success. Can you force somebody? Yeah, of course you can, but whether you'll get the outcome that you need is not necessarily, something that you can count on. So I would say that as long as the founder and the entrepreneur behind the business understands that in order for you to move on and to exit, you need to give this business its own life, its own air, that it can't just live because of you, that it's not embryonically connected to you, like avatars. And, like that's just what you need to do. Like you need to have that moment of self-assessment to say, okay, this is how far I've driven it. This is how far I can take it. I like to do other exciting things. And I think a lot of people, what they miss is that they're not thinking about what's after because they're so attached personally to this business and emotionally to this business that they don't really think, well, what else could I be doing with my time? What other exciting opportunities or projects? They think of an exit as an end, and it's not. It's just the beginning of the next chapter.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because I always call it like the Michelangelo principle, where after finishing the statue of David, he went on to go paint the Sistine Chapel, but it was built on the foundations of the last masterpiece that he was able to go do his next one. So 100% agreement there. I think that's awesome. Let's transition a little bit here because you had that intense trial by fire very early. You were successful in what it is that you went in there to do. And now what? Now you have the success after this business, but what was next for you after helping your family get through that time?
Let me say that, your definition of success might be different to mine. I didn't see what I did as a success. It was just, saved ourselves. We avoided bankruptcy. We avoided all sorts of negative things. That is, a version of success. Don't get me wrong, but it's not like we walked out and we were, with a few money traveling in private jets. It was just a local bakery that we salvaged to sell. So the reality was that it was just back to square one. Like, they had to find work, they had to find employment, and so did I. Yes, that we had a little bit of money in the bank, but it wasn't something that was going to kind of be lasting. And so the first thing that I did was really look for employment, but not in banking. So I was looking for something else. And because of my upbringing, I enjoyed travel. So I was looking to become a flight attendant at the time. And there were only two airlines that I wanted to work for. One was Qantas from Australia, one was Emirates from Dubai, coincidentally. I live here now. But they weren't employing anybody. I had done all the training. I had done all the things. I had obviously customer service experience because of working in my parents' bakery, but they weren't employing. One day I was with some friends in a local casino, and it was a temporary casino. They were building the big casino right next door. And I saw some of my school friends and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And they were working as croupiers in the casino. I said, "Hey, well, look, they're starting the new casino. If you're looking for work, why don't you start there?" And I went for a test. I was pretty good at math, and they accepted me straight away. And that kind of took off my what I call gaming career. That was the first time that I could see something that, although I didn't like people telling me what to do or some of the rules that they put in place on how they operate, it was a different environment. It wasn't an office. It was exciting, bit of nightlife as well, people having fun. And so I started my gaming career. A year into that, I got a call from Emirates. They were, now employing again. And I said to myself, well, look, if I became a flight attendant, what's kind of my lifespan as a flight attendant? Is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? But you can't do it forever. So what's the career progression there? And I didn't really see a comparative in the casino industry where as you progress, you learn more games, you become a supervisor, then you become a pit manager, then you become a shift manager. It was like there was a very clear progression. So I thought to myself, maybe I'll just stick around with this. And that's what I did. That was kind of the beginning of my professional career beyond that banking job that lasted 6 months.
Okay. So you were in a time you had to figure out what was next for your next chapter, and gaming kind of popped. You just was a opportunity presented itself.
Yeah, it didn't. It was just one of these coincidences. I saw a friend behind a table, said hello, and that's where it started.
That's cool. So when did you realize that there was another business opportunity for you in gaming?
Well, let me kind of explain it this way. One of the things I'll give you an anecdote from my past, and that kind of will shape some of the answers that I'll give you. So back in the day when I was a child, my mom always told me the story that, when they ask me the typical question of what do you want to be when you grow up? And some kids want to be a firefighter, some people want to be an astronaut and whatever. My answer to them was I wanted to be a millionaire. Now, at that time, I didn't know what the hell that meant, but I had maybe through my experiences of lack of, having money as a family and having to travel the world in order to look for a better future, I was looking at that as the answer, not necessarily as a job or a career. But when I started in gaming, all I saw was a pretty well paid job, way better than the bank. Then there was a clear career progression that I could really master over time. And then it was just nothing else. I didn't look for work. I didn't look for a business. I didn't look for anything else. But I was fortunate because I actually was put onto a group of people that was only and exclusively in the VIP rooms. So I would
Mm.
go and deal games like blackjack, roulette, baccarat, these types of games that are for the high rollers. And I would look at these people who are betting hundreds of thousands of dollars a hand, and I'm saying to myself, how the hell do you afford this? I'm not speaking loudly, I'm just speaking internally. But, I would see people betting and losing $1 million and say, I'll see you tomorrow. And that was my world. So I said to myself, you can't be an employee to do this, right? So then when I built a relationship with some of these high rollers, and you start asking, what do you do? And what do you do? And then so on and so forth. So you start to learn that owning a business can give you financial freedom that no employee. That kind of between that and what my parents did, I kind of understood that business is kind of where you can do better than just earning an hourly rate. And that led me to my first failure. I launched a business because I was always in the high rollers room. I launched a business called High Rollers Network, which was an online affiliate website dedicated for high rollers for online casinos. And this is back in the day. We're talking early 2000s. And I was able to strike special affiliate deals and special bonuses and deals for attracting high rollers to their online casinos. I launched that just from an idea. I secured a little bit of funding from someone that believed in me. It ultimately ended up failing because it was just too early of an idea. It was the right idea at the wrong time. And then, I had the backing of being able to work for a casino. So I didn't really lose much except gain a lot of experience from it.
Interesting. I love how you put it. It's the right idea at the wrong time. Can you elaborate on that? And what does that mean?
Well, I'll give you the opposite of that. The right idea at the right time, which is the next business that I launched, which is the Australian Poker League, which I launched in 2005. When I finished off that High Rollers Network project, it kind of understood that the online world and the online gambling world was going to be way bigger than the casino that I worked at. So I wanted to kind of transition career-wise from working in a real live casino to the online gaming space. There were a number of operators in Australia and many overseas, and I was just trying to secure work in that environment. During my search, I got I got interviewed by poker sites. Again, this is the early days of online poker, and I was learning about that as well. And I also was part of a team that put poker in the casino that I was working in. So, casinos have different games, blackjack, roulette, baccarat, different games, and poker hadn't been introduced. And I was part of the team that was doing that. This was the time that poker started to really take off with the World Poker Tour on TV showing every, I think, Wednesday or Thursday night, and, online poker taking off. The popularity of poker started to take off. So at the time, I was, looking at gaming in two different lenses. One is the real world, and one was in the online world. Unfortunately, I could not get in, or I was not successful in securing a job in the online space. Through my research, I thought, well, what can I do here? Is there something that I can get involved in? Taking you back to the Christmas, New Year's of 2020. I found myself in debt around $40,000. I was working as an employee and I amassed $40,000 in debt. One was I had some dental work that needed to be done because of an accident, relationship. I was engaged to a girl that, we fell apart. Life can take you in those different places. So when I returned from a holiday, that of actually my current wife, I said to her, this is not working out, whatever, we split up. But, I kind of embarked on saying, all right, how the hell am I going to pay this $40,000 working as an employee? The way I did it was by hosting poker games in my apartment, my one-bedroom apartment, every single week. And I would tear down my apartment, empty out my fridge, fill it up with alcohol and drinks, order pizzas, and I invited all my friends from work. And I was able to turn that negative 40,000 into zero in 10 months between playing and taking commission from the game. So to cut a long story short, I then transitioned and said, okay, how do I turn this one-bedroom operation into a business whilst I was actually helping the casino put poker in the casino? And I was almost kind of their competitor in a way, but obviously at a super small scale. But I was involved in a lot of the legislation and stuff like that. So I understood the business of poker, not just the gaming side. And I came across the idea of, let me try to take it outside of the casino, and I couldn't do it. The legislation wouldn't allow me. The casino had an exclusive license that they paid $100 million. What the hell is Martin going to do?
Wow.
So to cut a long story short, I decided to not charge anything. You make poker for free. And you think, well, how the hell do you make money if you're not charging anything? And the way it worked is that I created what's called the Australian Poker League. It was a competition where we would host live poker tournaments in pubs and clubs all around the city for a major prize, and people would play for free. And the venues, the pubs and clubs that we would host and the bars that we would host these events in, they would pay us for every person that we brought to the door because they would gamble, they would eat, they would drink, they would spend money. And that became the business the first successful business that I did. Just the business from day one. So I had all of my friends from work that would play my poker games. I offered them franchises straight away. We blanketed the Sydney metropolitan area. We launched in November 2005. And within 3 years, we were doing $50 million in turnover and 22 franchises in 2 countries. We were sitting 250,000 players a month. This is real live poker. This is not, just online. We were in 1,800 venues and we were producing our own TV shows all within 3 years.
That's incredible. So many questions.
That's the right idea at the right time.
The right idea at the right time. That's the moral of that story. But
Exactly.
talk to us a little bit about what it feels like and the roller coaster of hyperscaling something from 0 to 50 million in 3 years. Like, what's that roller coaster like?
Right. So there's a physical roller coaster of having to work 24/7. There is no sleep. There is no relationships. There's no time for eating. There's no time for anything. You're just riding and holding on for dear life. There is nothing else you can do. There is also an ego roller coaster, meaning look at what I built, what a genius I am. Everybody telling me, oh, what a brilliant idea, or I wish I had this idea. Those are the two things that I would hear most often because they saw starting from nothing to be essentially creating an industry that's still operating today, 20 years on. So it gets into your head, like let me just say. But reflecting back, I have to give tremendous amount of credit to the franchisees who ran the business in their own local region, to give tremendous credit to the venues, the pubs, clubs and bars that hosted these games and paid us for the privilege to host these games for their customers or to bring new customers through their doors. To give credit to the people, the players who gravitated to the brand that we built and I can't lie to you and tell you that I had girls and guys tattoo my logo on their bodies. That's how loyal or passionate these people became. So I must have done something right, but you can't just give yourself all the credit, right? I
Ooh.
think that, and thinking back as well, is that no matter which business you talk to, anybody that has that level of stratospheric growth, there's a tremendous amount of luck needed. You have to be at the right place at the right time. Yes, you have to have the right idea and you have to execute. Don't get me wrong. That's what I take credit for. But the timing couldn't have been better. It's like catching that wave at the perfect time and surfing it all the way to the shores. And a lot of people that do succeed, if you look at the Airbnb story, if you look at the Facebook story, if you look at any major story, even the recent ones, the OpenAIs or whatever, there is an element of luck that they may publicly acknowledge or not, but they would not be where they are today if other external factors did not propel your project forward. It's not all about you.
Wow, I love that. It's not about you, not all about you. What were some of those key lessons, those going through that process of holding on that you had that maybe you weren't aware of before you started, but it really helped again shape you into who you are today in this position and acquired venture?
It really comes down to at the beginning you don't know any better. So let's just say a lot of people, and whether it's their ego talking or something else, they think that they're it and they're not. They figured it out. They were guided. They fell in the right place. There's a lot of I believe external factors that make such a success, a success. What I learned, and again, it's retrospectively, I didn't figure it out while I was doing it, is that I had a very clear vision of what this product needed to be. And I didn't waver from it. I knew the product intimately, meaning I was a poker player. I was hosting poker games. I helped the casino put poker in the casino. I understood the legislation. I understood the law. I understood the needs of the pubs and clubs who want new customers coming through the doors every weekend. And that's why they have the trivia nights or the bingo nights or the something else. Now they have poker as an option. So I saw things very holistically, and then I put the puzzle together. And then I executed, and I executed at speed. That's why we launched as a franchise. That's why we launched the entire city all at once, because the barrier of entry to get into a couple of poker tables and some chips is not hard. But how do you build a brand around it? How do you build a competition around it? That's kind of the things that I thought through well before I actually pulled the trigger to start. And during the process, you're getting pulled in a million different directions. This person, this franchisee wants this person, this franchisee wants that. You have your partners wanting this, you're getting pulled in that direction. How do you continue to steer the business in the original vision whilst being adaptive is what I do give myself credit for, is that I figured that piece out very, very quickly. I don't consider myself a visionary or anything like that. It's just, I don't know, I'm just open to feedback and trying to be alert about the opportunities and adjust accordingly. It's not much more than that. It's not rocket science. Again, if you have a clear vision and your first steps are leading to you towards that vision and it's starting to snowball, then just double down until something stops you. So that's kind of the thing that I took away from that business. The other thing that I've learned the hard way is that sometimes you flog a horse to death. And what I mean by that is that you're jockeying this horse in a particular direction and it's just not going, and you're feeling a lot of resistance. When you actually feel resistance, this is a moment for you to step back and realize that this may not be the direction. Whether you believe in God or anything else, a higher being, whatever it is irrelevant. It's more about having that sense of this doesn't feel right. This is not heading in that direction. Why is there so much resistance? And maybe the world is guiding you in a different place. And having that awareness of let's wake up to this and at least look for alternatives is something that I also realized post that project. It's something that I do every day today.
Interesting. Pain reflection, essentially, right? So you're encountering a certain amount of pain and going a different direction or in the same direction, that's time to pause, reflect, and see what's going on under the hood.
And some people think that's quitting, right? Or that's giving up on that dream or that idea. And like, I don't really think about it that way. I think about, is it making me money or is it not making me money? Actually, I don't care about the idea at the end of the day if it's sending me broke. I can tell you with personal experience, I've gone through that road where I think that I'm right. I'm thinking I'm right. I think I'm right. And I'm just not right. And I'm failing and falling on my face and not acknowledging it. I'm able to do that after, having started many, many businesses. I've started 9 companies in 25 years. So I know the things that I've done right and the many things that I've done wrong. And not everything is, straight to the right thing. And the sooner your ego gets removed from the equation and the sooner you can acknowledge what you're good at and what you're not good at, the easier things get over time. And, and my career has led me to where I am today, which I'm sure we'll cover. It's just more about, if you're honest with yourself, you can achieve a lot more.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So this company you also exited, correct?
So I partially exited the business in 2008, about 3.5 years in. We sold half the company to Australia's largest TV network because we were producing our own poker shows and they wanted to own the sport of poker on television. Within 3 months of the deals and the check cashing in, the CEO and CFO got fired by the owner. So everything that we had agreed on, everything else went to absolute rubbish. And we kind of had to start from scratch. About a year later, a year and a half later, we bought the business back for $1. So even though we had paid them handsomely dividends over that period of time, they wrote off the rest of the investment as a loss. We took the business back, and by that time, I was kind of out of the business. My partner merged with a competitor, and that's kind of where I left it in around 2011.
So talk to us about what this exiting experience is like from selling to a big television, production studio. Like what is that? What's that process like? And what were some of those key lessons you learned going through that you maybe didn't know before?
There are lots of lessons, and probably we need another show just for the lessons out of that exit. But the key takeaways are that the reasons for selling sometimes are monetary, sometimes are not. And you got to really know why you're selling. In our case, yes, there was a monetary transaction that was taking place for acquiring 50% of the business, which went straight into our pockets. It wasn't an investment. It was an acquisition of half of the business. And the reason why we sold them, the reason why we sold to this particular company, even though it was a worse deal monetarily compared to others, is because of the opportunity that we were gaining working with these people. Now, you can imagine if you have a poker business and you're producing poker shows and you're now partnered with the number one television network and distribution in the country, you're going to explode because all of a sudden you're putting people that are playing for free in a local pub all the way on television. And that was the dream that we were able to create. So for us, the opportunity of getting more eyeballs into our product by, essentially publishing and putting our poker shows on TV was just tremendous. So again, it was more of the opportunity rather than the actual monetary transaction, because we were looking at having another bite of this apple, selling the second half of the business at a later stage for a high valuation. That was kind of the dream. Unfortunately, things don't happen as you plan. The transaction was, it took us the best part of 6 months to a year when we actually got approached by, the whole thing started because we got approached by broker who saw the tremendous success that we had and said, oh, well, would you be interested in selling some shares, or would you be interested in raising some capital or potentially exiting? And that kind of got the ball rolling. So it was kind of actually done for you. And then it was just more strategic on who do we want. We were negotiating with the World Poker Tour. We were negotiating with gaming companies in Australia. We were negotiating with other private equities. So there was kind of an introduction to the whole world of selling. It was two guys, had no idea what they were doing, figuring it out on the fly. We were trying to act like we knew what we were doing. But you ultimately find somewhere that you can land that you're happy with.
Interesting. Who did you surround yourself? Like you said, I mean, you said there was a certain amount of posturing, maybe a little bit since you hadn't done it before in this fashion, but who did you surround yourself around with to make sure that you were continuing to move in a positive direction for a positive outcome?
To be honest, I have to give my partner some credit because we were a good partner, good group. There was only two of us, 50-50. Ultimately, it didn't work out both at a personal level and a business level. But during the time we were running this business together, we were making really smart decisions. We never made a decision if either of us had disagreed with it. So we were always continuously moving because we really didn't have the time to disagree. You got to make decisions because we were flying at a pace that it was pretty ridiculous. So I give a little bit of credit to him. I did not have mentors, advisors, or anything like that. Yes, you have your accountants or lawyers, but most of them have never done a transaction. Most of them never exited a business, so they can't guide you. And the two people, the CEO and CFO of the company that we were partnering with, I saw them as potential mentors, people that could take me to the next level, educate me as a CEO, and so on. Both of them are still friends today. One of them is my business partner. So that should tell you a little bit about the people that we chose. And it was purely the people. And unfortunately, they got fired, but our relationship stayed on.
That's awesome though. I think it's great when you see people and you go towards relationships rather than just going for money. I think I think that in and of itself is a huge lesson.
Hey, don't
So
get me wrong. I like the money.
yeah, I mean,
But
money's
again,
nice.
you don't want to get into bed with the wrong people, right? And at the end of the day, you have to wake up with the same person on the other side of the bed, and you got to make the right choice.
Yep, for sure, for sure. So you built this team, you grew this company, you sold half of it, and they bought it back, and then what happens next? Talk to us. What's next?
Yeah. So look, I had pretty much, a lesson to learn. I ran that business like a dictator. They didn't. There was the entire franchise network. It came to a time that I was in a situation. Once the CEO and CFO got fired, two token board members joined. So we didn't have the rapport and that strategy that we had originally. It was just people, an accountant and a lawyer. They just put as board members to protect their asset, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, my original business partner cashed in and checked out of the business. So I was completely left alone with a useless board. The decisions that were being made were not in the vision that I had for the business. I couldn't make decisions because I went from a 50-50 partner to a 25% equity shareholder. And I also think what I did to get the business to the point that I got into my head, and I kept on running it like a dictatorship. People would do what I told them to do, not what I didn't take advice, I didn't take opinion, I didn't take anything from anyone. So that was my downfall. The franchisee network revolted against me. They did a vote of no confidence, and they said, "We don't want you to run the business anymore," even though I was a you know major shareholder in the business. I wasn't the controlling shareholder anymore. And I had been burnt out. My partner left. The house of cards started falling. So I basically left the business, started venturing in other things. But as far as that business is concerned, we bought it back for $1 because they wanted to write it off financially. And then my partner, because he wasn't operating the business anyway, he just merged with the competitor and let it go for next to nothing. But at least we were all gone. We had cash in the bank. We moved on from that project. Since then, this is around 2011, 2012, started so many different businesses. I got into franchising. I bought, hair salons, started a digital magazine, did all sorts of things, and thinking that, again, pardon my French, that my shit doesn't stink and that everything that I do turns to gold. And everything turned to dust. So much so that over a 7-year period between 2000, well, maybe a 6-year period between 2011, 2016, 17, I lost all my money. Everything that I had made, everything that I had sold, the millions of dollars that I did is just bad business after bad business, thinking that I could make this work. And it's a very humbling lesson when you go from 0 to 50 million in turnover and then sell the business, for a nice sum and then lose it all because you're making mistakes. So it was a very humbling period, very embarrassing. Not many people know that this happened. I've spoken a little bit publicly here and there, but not many people know that this happened to me. And then I had to rebuild. And remember the story that I was telling you that I was negative $40,000 in the hole before I started the poker business. I found myself negative $200,000 at this point. I was
Oh,
actually using what in North America, the 401k money to survive and to maintain my family. And a little bit of luck and the ship turned around, and I took all my learnings and applied them to where I am today.
That's awesome. And what were those main lessons that you needed to learn other than humility, right? What did that time, we'll call it the wandering in the desert period for you, like what were some of those other key lessons that you really took away from those different experiences in different industries?
Well, what normally happens is when you make that many mistakes, you learn what not to do just as much as you learn what to do. So I think people don't appreciate that. They look at failure as I failed. Excuse me. You didn't fail, you learned. Some people get this and some people don't. And if you live through it, you definitely get it. In my case, I learned what not to do more than what I should do. I think
Mm,
that in the poker business, there was a tremendous level of luck that got me in that stratospheric growth and what we were able to achieve. But I didn't take the learnings of what it takes to do that without the right timing and the right everything, right? But when I went to the other ventures, I just thought that whatever I touched would turn to gold. And it just doesn't work like that. You got to figure out the product, you got to figure out the service, or you figure out what you're selling. You got to sell it to the right person. They have to buy it, and so on and so forth. And in my case, one of the lessons that I didn't learn, or two of the lessons that I didn't learn during the poker business, is that I never marketed the business. This was done all at a local level. In the pubs and clubs, they would put posters and promote it locally. So I never learned how to promote this brand. And that I never took to the other businesses. So I never learned marketing properly. And I
mm,
also never sold it beyond the franchise network. I only had to sell to franchisees. They ended up having to sell it to the venues. And that sales experience also was missing in my repertoire. So I couldn't take that on to the other projects. Now, I can tell you that every other project that I got involved in had tremendous potential. But again, it could have been the right idea at the wrong time, like the original business that I started, or it was just me and my arrogance thinking, hey, I can make this work, and it doesn't. So the humility one is a big one. That's the main one that I learned. The second one is to really, I just meet the market where it is, right? Like don't try to force this idea onto people. Try to figure out what people need. And at the end of the day, a business, all it does is solve a problem. And the problem either makes the buyer money or it saves them money, especially in the business world. At a consumer level, it's just, it either does the job or it doesn't do the job, right? But at a business level, which is kind of where I was in, you quickly need to figure out, simplify things to say, does this idea make my customer money or does it save them money or both? And if it does any of those three, you already have a successful business. You just didn't have to kind of keep going and figuring it out. But there are other lessons that I took away from that experience. One of the lessons is that I don't know how to quit. I don't know how to lose. I'm a sore loser. So that's something that I kind of learned the hard way. I think that the naivety that entrepreneurs have is innate and it's an asset, not a liability. When you just go into an industry and a market and you think you can do better and you think there's a better solution and you just truly believe it, that is something very powerful that most people don't have. There's just more about personal realizations than lessons. And again, the lessons that I took are what not to do more than what you can do.
I love it. It's great insight right there. So people are gonna have to watch that part again right there because I think there's so much to unpack. Now so let's recap. You used three exits, right? So you have APL, you
Mhm.
had so far you exited the bakery business, right? What's number three?
So I started a company called Entrepreneur Card in Australia. It was just a local membership program for entrepreneurs, in which if you joined for an annual fee, you had access to a tremendous amount of discounts and benefits and so on. And, from AWS, server discounts to subscription discounts to all sorts of things. And you could only access it by being a member. In addition to that, we partnered with a travel company so we could provide some lifestyle benefits. And this particular travel company had access to, or they were a licensee of something that's called the Virtuoso program, where you can go to hotels and get upgrades for free and get $100 credits per stay and free breakfast and all this kind of stuff, as well as preferential benefits. So what we did is we launched this program. We would sell memberships. People would have access to the benefits. But little did we know that, within 6, 9 months, the number one reason why people were coming to our program was because of the travel benefits and not so much for the actual entrepreneurial business savings. So we quickly pivoted the business. We rebranded from Entrepreneur Card to Concierge without the E.com. It was an online platform. People would join, become a member, and we exited our business to the company that was actually servicing the customers. I mean, we were outsourcing that, we were partnered with somebody else, but they saw, hey, why am I paying you all these commissions when I could just buy you out? So that's kind of the last exit that I had. It wasn't too outrageous, but he kind of planted the seeds for the next things that I worked.
Interesting. Interesting. And what did it take? What were some of those key skills that you needed to be able to build this concierge service? Like what were some of those key takeaways, again, lessons learned and getting it to a successful exit?
Yeah. So I took my learnings from the poker business and I took my learnings from my other failures and try to minimize the reliance on people. And I'm not saying that people are bad or people are, they make your business. Don't get me wrong. Both the customers, they make your business because they buy your product, and your employees or partners who help you build the business. But what I found is that every business that I was involved in had too many spinning plates. And I wasn't a great manager. I don't think I am a great manager today. I'm just, in a way, a hustler. If you can, people say entrepreneur, it's a sexy, terminology, but at the end of the day, you're hustling, in one way or another. So, I never call myself a CEO for that very reason. I feel like you need to have a different skill set to be a CEO than you need to be a founder. So in this particular case, what I was really doing is trying to minimize the spinning plates. How many people I relied on, how many resources did I need, try to, do it with as little money as possible. Because as you can imagine, I went from millions over a 7-year period. I was going to zero. Every time that the account, the business failed, there was money lost. I had less money to actually start the next thing. So I had to do a lot more with less. And I had to become more resilient. So the main thing that I was trying to do is to minimize not only the employees, just everything that was to do with the business. So I try to make it as simple as possible. So what happened was when I was running that entrepreneur card, I had hundreds of partners from AWS to Microsoft to this and that. And then luckily I only had one partner with regards to the travel because they took care of the lot. So when we made the pivot, we kind of loaded a tremendous amount of burden from the business, admin-wise, let alone everything else, all those relationships that I needed to maintain in order to provide the service, to just one. And that kind of helped unleash some of the success because I was able to be more focused on the thing that people actually wanted, which was the travel services and not so much the discounts. So that's kind of the key learning. It was just more about understanding, what is the real, you could have a business that sells socks and you have 15 different SKUs. Maybe the black and white ones are the ones that you need to stick to and forget about the other colors, right? And that's kind of what happened in that sense.
That's interesting. So you took high level pattern recognition and you streamlined the business to basically only what your customer really wanted. And that
Correct. But you're using big words and I think you're giving me too much credit. It was just more, this is not working. Let's stick to this thing and streamline. That was more the decision making
yeah, let's
process.
do more of what's working. Do more of what's working. That's it.
Exactly. Look, to be honest, as I said, as a founder, I think myself that I only got 2 brain cells. I don't want to overwork them. I want to, optimize for the 2 brain cells that I have, try to keep it simple, stupid. And that normally works in my favor.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Simplify everything. Simplify your business. Simple, simple. So excellent. So that's amazing. Thank you so much for taking us through this journey of your experiences, because I think there's definitely so many lessons here that everybody can take away. But let's talk specifically about your acquired ventures right now, because you have a target of early stage SaaS products, correct?
So what happened, to tell you the story behind Acquired Ventures, essentially what I did was I turned 50 last year. So I said to myself, okay, this is the kind of time of my life where I have to start thinking. It's not just hustling my way through life. I got 2 kids, I got a wife, I moved countries, I've done a lot of things, key decisions in life. And when you turn 50, you turn into someone that's a little bit smarter, more perspective, just by, turning the dial overnight. But taking jokes aside, I kind of realized that I've done 9 startups in my career. I've had 3 exits, one of them being quite meaningful. I'm currently running a business that's cash flowing very well, or doing over $10 million in annual revenues. And I wanted to figure out what I want to do with my time for the next chapter of my life. I'm not one of those people that will ever retire. I don't think founders retire. I think they just evolve and change what they put their mouth and their money in. But they're always hustling. That's kind of in our nature. So the first thing that I thought to myself is, what have I learned over these 50 years, 25 years in entrepreneurship? The reality of it all is that in businesses is tough. Exciting, especially for a young person who's creating something out of nothing. The reality is that it's so difficult. The failure rate is too high. for so many factors that you have no control over. You need a good amount of luck to be successful. So I kind of decided I need to take my learnings and decided that startups are not something that I want to kind of put my money into anymore. I don't invest. I just acquire profitable and successful businesses. That's my focus right now. We're doing around 10 million in annual recurring revenues right now with a small portfolio of products. We're growing that. We're acquiring more products. The goal is to get to 100 million in public, just do it completely front so everybody can see behind the scenes how we get there. And yeah, it was a pivotal moment in my life that I just said, look, I'm still young. Do I want the headaches of starting a business and failing times out of 10? When I can just wait for the company to be profitable, 3 years old, and give an off ramp to founder that deserves it.
That's awesome. And so you went through a mental shift. You're saying so self-proclaimed mental shift of hustle and grind culture to now I need to be more strategic with my time because now the time is what's most important to you, not the experience anymore. Talk to us about how you go about looking at companies to acquire. What is your process like? And this will help give insight again to people that are looking to sell because like how does this reflect on me, right, as they go through that self discovery process. But talk to us about your process of how you look at evaluating companies to purchase.
First thing that you need to do is to, in my opinion, you need to have a thesis. This is what I believe in. This is the industries I believe in. This is the products I believe in. This is whatever it is that you believe in, you need to have clarity around that. The other thing you need to do is double down on what you're good at and drop everything else. And what I mean by that is, if I'm involved in software right now, and I started from bakeries and banking and went into gaming and also, I've amassed a tremendous amount of skill, but they're business skills, not necessarily industry specific. But a lot of people that have a business, they have a business in an industry that they are either passionate about or they have expertise in. Don't get yourself involved in stuff that you have no knowledge about. Like if I got into a project in water purification. Like, what the hell do I know about that? You know what I mean? So what I'm trying to say is you need clarity of what your want to put your money or your time in. And the second is you want to know what you're good at and double down on that and remove every other distraction. So that's kind of the baseline for me. So my clarity is very simple. I am only looking for software companies that are currently in the B2B sales automation kind of space or data space. There's a lot of excitement about AI. I exclude anything that's got the AI in it, even though everything pretty much now has got AI on it. It's got to be turning over at least $1 million in revenue, and it's going to be operating for 3 to 5 years. That's kind of, again, the next layer of baseline to say anything that doesn't fall in this, it's going to be automatically discarded, no matter how exciting the opportunity it is. And I can tell you, if you have money in your pocket that's burning a hole and you actually want to invest in something, you get quickly excited into lots of projects. You get excited about the founder, you get excited about the opportunity, you get excited about the tech and so on and so forth. So bringing all of that together, and again, not overworking my 2 brain cells. I'm just saying, okay, this is the only thing I talk about. This is the only thing I want to talk to you about. And if it falls outside of that, we're not talking. Then it gives me a great foundation for clarity and speed because I can do deals a lot faster. I'm talking the same language with the same people because we're in the same industry, yada, yada, yada. It kind of works. As far as assessing a business, no 2 businesses are the same. The reality is that you need to be flexible, adaptable. You got to look at the bones and see if you can work with those bones. If you can't, then you discard it. If you can, you can investigate further. Try to not overcomplicate things. Just try to keep it simple and clear between me and the seller. Also, the way I operate is that I only take controlling shares. I either buy 51 or anywhere between 51% and 100% of the business. Not because I'm a control freak, although my wife could say that I am. It's more about, I've learned what happens when there is no real key decision maker. That happened to me in the poker business. You're 50-50. It's great if you have a good partner, but if you don't, the business doesn't progress. So I like to at least have control of the business. And I can buy the whole thing, or I buy 51% and I give the founder an off ramp where they can keep on taking more bites of the apple instead of an earn out. I can say, okay, well, you want to sell 10% more in a year's time? Okay, here's the valuation. We pre-agreed to all of this. We grew the business by this much and the old valuation is now this. Okay, here's the check and we move on. And it gives for optionality because most founders don't want to leave the business. As I said, they have that kind of affinity and emotional relationship with the business where they can't let go. So my goal is to say, all right, well, Don't let go. I can't run it tomorrow anyway. So why don't we just work together? Yeah, I own 51% or more, but at least you can still feel like you have enough vested interest. You can still direct it, with my guidance, and you can have more bites at the apple all the way on the way out.
Interesting. So you have a creative deal structure where you buy first, you buy a bigger chunk to gain controlling interest, but then in order to make sure that it's not really structured as an earnout, but you agree to help them, and they build the business, they continue to build the business, and they get a higher valuation. You're giving them a bigger chunk, like you're saying, another big bite of the apple, but they're getting another payday right later down the road by continuing to be there and to help you operate it for X amount of period, right?
It aligns incentives. And that's kind of the way I look at it. If we have incentives that are aligned, that we're all going in the same direction, when money is flowing, people don't have conflict. It's only when shit hits the fan that you have problems, right? That's kind of when the controlling share is important. But most of the time, if you find that the person's agreeable, that you've come to terms, it's not difficult. This is not rocket science. We're not curing cancer here. We're not Elon Musk putting people on in Mars. We trying to run a business, and we either agree to how to do things or we don't. And if you quickly find that out very early in the negotiation.
Interesting. And what's your experience of people that want a full payout right away versus those that are willing to take that prolonged deal structure?
Look, in my space, unfortunately, because I'm in the tech world, the number one struggle that I find is where people have unrealistic expectations of what their businesses are worth. So they come to the negotiating table looking at TechCrunch and then coming to me and saying, "Oh, yeah, I want 10x." And I say, "Well, where did you get that from?" And I'm pretty, honest. I hope that this is coming across in our interview. Tell you how it is. Tell you if it's going to work very quickly or not, and I'll tell you why it's not going to work. And hopefully, I'm either the first or the last person you learn from before you actually make a deal. The reality is that most people don't know what they're doing when they're selling. I didn't know what I was doing when they're selling. With all due respect, where are you going to learn? There is no textbook. Deals are normally, opaque or closed completely because they're private. Only the big deals that you hear on TechCrunch are the ones that you hear about. You don't hear the details. You hear the numbers, the valuations, and then the things. The secret is in the nuance of the transaction, right? How it actually came about. And most people don't hear about that. Through my personal brand and what I'm working on in the next few years, my goal is to kind of bring a lot of light into that, bring you behind the scenes of an acquisition, bring you behind the scenes of the acquirer as well as the seller, and give you perspective. So whenever you are ready to sell or buy a business, you're getting the other side of the story before you begin. And I think that's very helpful. So yeah, that's kind of how I approach it. I don't believe that I have a secret sauce on how to do deals. I'm human. I founder first because I've been in the shoes of founders all my life. That's the big difference between me acquiring and a PE or a VC investing, is that they're looking at spreadsheets and I'm looking at you and you looking at me, and we either make it happen or we don't. And that human element of investing and acquiring businesses has helped me so far.
That's awesome. And what do you want to, what's a piece of wisdom and advice that you want to tell people that are trying to go through this process on the first go around that have not had all your experience? What's something that you just want to tell them that you see as a problem, right? What's something that comes up regularly as a stumbling block that you say, hey, you need to do this. This is what you should do.
Well, there are a lot of things that you can do from educating yourself. The difference at the beginning of this interview, I said to you that people need to treat their business as an asset. Okay. And I compared it to a house, but it's very different to a house. And what I mean by that is that there is an established market for a house. Okay. If I live in this neighborhood and I have a house that's got 4 bedrooms and a garage and a pool and this and that and the other, it goes for around this price. Historical precedent for acquiring that property, that asset. When you're talking about business, there are ranges. There are ranges, and they're so big that that's where a lot of conflict happens in negotiations, where you're at one spectrum of the range and I'm at the other. You're justifying your spectrum, I'm justifying the other, but the market is not doing that. So the thing that I would say is that number one is come with open eyes, be humble and let the market educate you on what your business is worth. Don't come in and say, oh, it's got to be worth this or I'm not selling. So that's number one. Number two, don't set the price because that's what you need or want. So some people say, I want $3 million. Well, the business is only worth $500K. I mean, I want want to be 7 foot tall and play in the NBA. It doesn't mean anything, right? Like, so people need to come with an understanding that the market sets the price, not you. And no matter what you want, it's irrelevant. If nobody's going to pay for it, you haven't sold the business. Your business is only worth what people are willing to pay for it. The third thing is that you want to build, and this is where you, if you're a little bit more sophisticated, you want to get yourself a broker, you want to get an advisor, you want to get a seller side M&A expert or someone who has done this before and can create a market. Because what tends to happen, and this is typical from PE firms and VC firms that want to invest, is that they're out there hunting and they're saying, hey, I like to, I love what you're doing. Let me take you out for coffee. Let me take you out for, steak dinner and this and that and the other. They're trying to butter you up. Then you don't have a market. You only have one person that thinks the world of you, and then they want to sell the business. And why do they want to do that? Because it's cheaper for them to invest in building a relationship with you and wining you and dining you than it is to compete in an open market where your business might be up for sale in a brokerage or an M&A firm or acquire.com or some other website like that. When you're in an open market, it's like an auction when you're buying a house. You got this one paddling or this one paddling, say, hey, I want more, pay more, pay more, pay more. And then you can quickly learn. That's the only real way to learn and maximize your price. That's if you want to sell the whole thing, right? Some people, don't want to leave straight away, but they want to take some chips off the table. They might only want to sell 10, 20, 30, 40%. They still have a controlling share, or they're happy to sell a bit more, but, not have an earnout, but just, be a board member. There's a lot of nuances of how to do it. So those are the key three things that I would say, to take away. You want to kind of be flexible, like you are in your business, you have to be flexible. Do that in the sale process and try to detach emotionally from it as soon as possible. So try to remove yourself from day-to-day operations. Do that as soon as possible. Try to remove yourself emotionally from the day-to-day operations. And the last but not least, the last piece of advice is do not count the check until it hits the wire hits the bank account. So many people dream of the Ferraris and the Porsches and the luxury yachts and all this kind of stuff. And the check hasn't even been written, let alone hit your bank account. And that's the mistake that a lot of people make. And then they get disillusioned with the whole process. They take it out on the next buyer who could have been the better buyer, and so on and so forth. So yeah, don't count your chips until you cash them.
Great advice there for sure. Absolutely. And I know we're running short on time here, so I want to be respectful of that. But if you could sum up, what are the top 3 deal killers that you see most often?
As a buyer, I'm looking at it from a buyer's perspective, is again, unrealistic expectations is the biggest issue. And that's by far, I would say 80% of the problem. That's the biggest problem that a buyer faces, is that you cannot, I'm not here to educate you to sell you to buy your business. Like, I'm here to buy it. I'm going to give you what I feel is right. Because you're not following a structured process, you might think you're getting screwed, or you think you're screwing me, or whatever. But the reality is that there is no open market telling you what the reality of it is. And if you're only dealing with one buyer, then you're going to be with limited information, and you're not going to be able to make the best decision. Doesn't mean that it will be the wrong decision, but it might not be the best decision. So unrealistic expectations is one. Founder dependency is 2. I won't put it as a percentile, just as big as unrealistic expectations, but it is a problem where unless I want to partner with you, I need to be able to control the business, not you. And if the business is dependent completely on you and you haven't built the systems and the structures and the staffing and whatever else, you didn't build a business, you build a really complex job. And that's not good for a buyer. So those are the 2 key ones that I always face. And the thing that I always say, and this might be unique to me, is that I'm very clear with sellers from the get-go. You can either set the price or the terms, but you can't set both. So what I mean by that is, if you want X price, I'm going to tell you how I'm going to pay for that. If you want to set the terms, I'm going to tell you how much I'm going to pay. And that, to me, that clarity from day one is very, very good for both the buyer and the seller, because there's no underhandedness. It's just very clear. You can't tell, if you want to set the price, you can set the price. If your business is worth 500K and you want 3 million, no problems. Let's agree on 3 million. But I'm telling you, this is how it's going to be paid. And you might have to wait 30 years to get paid. You know what I mean? So it's just the reality of you can't control the entire process unless you're a unicorn. And there are very few of those. So the average business that sells, sub $10 million, which is kind of the space that I'm in, they don't get to set both the price and the terms. And if you're happy with one or the other, or you want to control one or the other, then I think you have a lot more, say, more chances to be successful.
Awesome. That's amazing. Thank you so much for that, for those great pieces of wisdom there as well. What's one thing, well, we'll end with this is what's the last piece of wisdom that you would like to say to those founders that are struggling again with trying to figure out how to go to the next chapter, how to go to their next masterpiece, right? What's boil it all down to a first principle? What do you tell them?
The way I do this is compared to athletes, right? Athletes are normally known for whatever they did in their career, but their careers are very short. The average athlete, is 4 years, I believe, or something like that in NBA or NFL, something like that. It's something very short, but it defines them. It defines them for a couple of reasons. One is because they worked the entire early years towards that one goal. Once they got there, then they work towards excelling in that place. So it's defined a big portion of their life, although their careers are very short. And then when they move on, they lose themselves. Very few are there like Michael Jordan's and LeBron James and others who have moved on and be successful beyond that. What I say to founders is, what do you want to be known for? Do you want to be known for this or what? You don't even know what you could be known for. And the Michelangelo example that you shared earlier, it's very poignant in this because he did one thing and then that led to the next. And look what he's become and what he's being remembered for. So, at the end of the day, what drives you, motivates you, it's really an individual case by case scenario. For me, I look at money as a tool for me to have amazing experiences and have a quality of life that I couldn't get working in a bank, right? I knew that from the gifts from so I've been able to achieve success. I've been able to experience failure at the highest levels. All of it is learning lessons. Now I'm back on my feet, successful. I've learned from my mistakes. I don't repeat those. So again, I just think that it's an individual experience. The motivations are very different, but a business does not define you. Is how you put it. I put it in a morbid way. What do you want to be remembered when you actually die and people are at your funeral? Are they going to talk about your business? They probably won't. So don't attach yourself to something that, is just an asset.
Wow. Super powerful there. What do you want to be known for? I think that's great parting wisdom for a way to wrap up this segment. But Martin, where can people find you?
Right now, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's pretty much the only social network that I use. I share a lot of my experiences very openly there. I received a lot of positive feedback for being transparent. A lot of people, especially in Dubai, where I live, it's a lot of Lambos and a lot of yachts, but that's not reality. I'm a humble person. I have my flaws and I have my successes as well in life. And, to me, I just want to kind of share. I'm also doing it for my kids. I'm openly sharing because I want my kids to learn, which are relatively young. So I want them to see me for what's possible and also what could happen. So LinkedIn is the number one platform. You can find me. I'm soon going to be launching my own YouTube channel where I'm going to go into way more depth into these things. I'm going to show you behind the scenes deals that I'm transacting, that I'm either buying or selling. I'm actually doing interviews similar to this with exited founders so you can get the entire experience similar to what I just shared with you, but of a particular exit so you can get into the behind the scenes of what actually happens. I'm also going to be interviewing a lot of investors, VCs, and angels so you can get the buyer side of the story. My goal is very similar to you. Is I want to educate. I want, all these founders, if I can help them improve their knowledge by 1% on how to be successful in an exit, I think we've both done a tremendous job.
Excellent. I love it. And so we'll put a link to all of your current socials in the description of this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe and go follow Martin on LinkedIn in particular. He's always putting out great nuggets every day. So Martin, thanks so much for being here. This has been an absolute pleasure. And with that, I will go ahead and sign off. So thanks so much, everybody.